This story is titled, My Girlfriend Said I Was Replaceable, but later begged me to take her back because she wasn't wanted as she thought. So, I've been dating my girlfriend, Sarah, for 2 years now. Things were going pretty well, or at least I thought they were. We moved in together about a year ago, and honestly, it felt like the next natural step. I'm 28, she's 26, and at this point, I figured we were building something solid. Since she's still in school and not working full-time, I've been covering most of the bills. It didn't bother me at first. I own the house anyway, and it felt like I was helping her get through a tough time. Being supportive. I thought of us as a team, and when she finished her degree, it'd even out. No big deal, right? But lately, things have been feeling off. Sarah's been going out with her friends more and more, and I'm not talking about once a week or something casual. It's like every other night now. She doesn't invite me, and when I ask what she's up to, she gets super defensive, like I'm accusing her of something. She says she needs space and that I shouldn't be so clingy. Clingy? I barely even see her anymore. I leave for work, come home, and half the time she's either already out or getting ready to go. When she is home, it's like she's not even present. She's glued to her phone or just kind of distant. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. Everyone needs their own time to hang with friends, right? I didn't want to be that guy, the controlling boyfriend who makes everything about himself. So I backed off and gave her the space she wanted. But even when I did, things didn't improve. A few nights ago, we were just sitting around, having a pretty normal conversation. At least it started that way. We were talking about relationships and loyalty, and she just casually drops, you're pretty replaceable. What? I kind of froze for a second, like, did she really just say that? I laughed awkwardly because I honestly thought I must have misheard her or she was joking. But she just kept talking, like it was no big deal, saying, there are plenty of guys who would love to be with me. I didn't know how to react. I was sitting there trying to process what she'd just said, and she's acting like it's the most normal thing in the world. I asked her what she meant by that, and she immediately started backtracking. It's just a joke, she said. Don't take it so seriously. But here's the thing, her tone wasn't joking. You know how someone's voice changes when they're teasing or messing around? Yeah, there was none of that. She sounded serious. Like, if I had reacted differently, she wouldn't have even tried to walk it back. The rest of the night was awkward. I couldn't stop thinking about what she said, and I guess she noticed because she kept asking me if I was mad. I just told her I was tired and went to bed early. The next morning, I woke up still feeling weird about it. Who says something like that to their boyfriend? Especially when we weren't even arguing or anything. It felt like she wanted to make me feel insecure on purpose, like a power move or something. Now I'm stuck in my own head, questioning everything. I mean, if she's saying stuff like this, does she even want to be in this relationship? And if she doesn't, why not just say it? Why play games? I've tried to replay the moment over and over, thinking maybe I misread it or took it the wrong way, but the more I think about it, the worse it feels. It's not just the comment itself, it's everything leading up to it. The late nights out, the defensiveness, the weird vibe at home. It's like she's already halfway out the door but doesn't have the guts to end it. And now I'm here, wondering if I should be the one to pull the plug. Part of me thinks I'm overreacting, but the other part can't shake the feeling that this is a huge red flag. If she doesn't value me or see me as someone worth being with, what's the point? I've been in bad relationships before, but this feels different. It's not the usual fights or disagreements. It's more like she's trying to test me or push me away, and I'm not sure if I want to stick around to see how far she'll go. Anyway, I'm just trying to figure out my next move. Am I crazy for thinking this is a big deal, or should I just let it go and see if things get better? Honestly, I'm stuck, and I'd love to hear what you all think. Update 1. I couldn't stop thinking about what Sarah said. The whole "you're replaceable" thing just wouldn't leave my head. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was making too much out of it, but every time I looked at her, it was there in the back of my mind. After a couple of days, I realized I couldn't let it slide. I needed to bring it up and figure out what was really going on. So one evening, I told her we needed to talk. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like usual, and I sat down next to her. I kept it calm, just told her I'd been thinking about what she said and that it bothered me. She barely looked up. "What are you talking about?" she said, like she had no idea what I was referring to. "You know," I said. "The whole thing about me being replaceable. It didn't feel like a joke, and it's been bugging me ever since. That's when her whole vibe shifted. She rolled her eyes and put her phone down. Are you seriously still on that? It was just a comment. You're being dramatic. I told her I wasn't trying to start a fight, but I needed to understand why she'd say something like that. Did she actually feel that way, or was it just some random thing she said without thinking? Instead of answering, she sighed and got defensive. God, you're so sensitive. I didn't mean anything by it. You're blowing this way out of proportion. At this point, I could feel myself getting frustrated. I'm not trying to make this a bigger deal than it is, I said. But if you really think I'm replaceable, then why are we even together? I want to know where your head's at because this doesn't feel right. And that's when she hit me with it. She crossed her arms, looked me dead in the eye, and said, Honestly? Yeah, I've thought about it. There are better guys out there, but I'm with you because I love you. That should be enough. I just stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. Better guys out there? She was basically telling me she was settling for me, like I was the consolation prize or something. I stayed quiet for a minute, trying to figure out how to respond without losing it. So, let me get this straight, I said finally. You think you're settling for me, but I should just be okay with that because you love me? Is that what you're saying? She shrugged. Yeah, I guess. Look, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but I'm just being honest. That's when it clicked for me. This wasn't just a one-time comment or a bad joke. It was how she actually felt. She didn't value me or our relationship. I realized I couldn't keep doing this. I think we're done, I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. Her eyes widened like she didn't believe what she'd just heard. Wait, what? You're breaking up with me over this? Yeah, I said. If you think I'm so replaceable, then go find one of those better guys you were talking about. I'm not going to stay in a relationship where I'm not valued. That's when the yelling started. She called me dramatic, selfish, ungrateful, basically throwing every insult she could think of. She even tried to turn it around on me, saying I was throwing her away after everything we'd been through. I didn't engage. I just told her she needed to move out. I reminded her that this was my house and that I'd been paying for everything while she focused on school. She tried to argue, saying she had nowhere to go, but I stood firm. I told her she had until the end of the week to pack her stuff and leave. At one point, she started crying, saying she couldn't believe I was doing this to her. But even then, it didn't feel genuine. It felt like she was more upset about losing her safety net than losing me. The rest of the night was tense. She slammed doors, muttered stuff under her breath, and avoided me as much as possible. I stayed in the bedroom while she stayed in the living room, and by the next morning, she was already packing her things. It wasn't easy. Part of me felt guilty, like maybe I was overreacting or being too harsh. But the other part of me knew I was doing the right thing. I couldn't stay in a relationship where I was seen as good enough for now. For by the end of the week, she was gone. I thought I'd feel a sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted, but instead, I just felt numb. I didn't know what came next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to settle for someone who thought I was replaceable. Update 2. After Sarah moved out, I thought things were finally settling down. The breakup had been messy, but I was starting to feel like I could breathe again. I wasn't second-guessing myself anymore. It felt like I'd made the right call cutting ties with someone who didn't see my value. Then, a few days later, I got a message that threw me for a loop. One of Sarah's friends, someone I didn't know too well but had seen at a few get-togethers, reached out to me. At first, I thought it was just going to be another guilt trip, maybe asking me to reconsider the breakup or something like that. But nope, it was way worse. She started off by saying she wasn't trying to stir the pot, but felt like I deserved to know the truth. She told me Sarah had been seeing someone else behind my back for months. According to her, the guy was someone Sarah had met through her friends, and she'd been sneaking around with him while still living in my house. At first, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me didn't want to believe it. But as she kept talking, a lot of things started making sense. The late nights, the defensiveness, and the way she'd suddenly started acting like she was doing me a favor by being with me. The friend even mentioned that after the breakup, Sarah went to this guy expecting to move in with him. And get this, he dumped her. Apparently, when he found out she'd been living with me rent-free and relying on my money while seeing him, he wanted nothing to do with her. Everything just clicked. I didn't know if I felt angry, betrayed, or just stupid for not seeing it sooner. But one thing was clear. I needed to confront Sarah. I messaged her and asked her to meet up. I wasn't planning to scream or make a scene. I just wanted to hear her side of the story. She agreed, and we met at a coffee shop the next day. When she walked in, she acted like everything was normal. She even smiled, like this was some casual catch-up between old friends. I wasted no time and got straight to the point. "I know about the other guy," I said. Her smile dropped instantly. "What are you talking about?" she asked, but her tone wasn't confident. She already knew. "Your friend told me everything," I said. "How long has it been going on?" At first, she tried to deny it. "I don't know what you're talking about. There's no one else," she said, but she wouldn't look me in the eye. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots her friend had sent me. "So you're saying this is all made up?" I asked. That's when she cracked. She started stammering, trying to explain herself. "Okay, fine," she said. "Yes, I was seeing someone, but it wasn't serious. I didn't want to hurt you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You didn't want to hurt me?" I said. "You were living in my house, letting me pay for everything while you were sneaking around with someone else. Do you even hear yourself right now?" She tried to justify it, saying she felt neglected because I was always busy with work and that she didn't know how to talk to me about it. She said the other guy made her feel wanted, like she was a priority. At that point, I was done. I told her she could spin it however she wanted, but it didn't change the fact that she'd been lying and using me. I got up, told her I never wanted to see or hear from her again, and walked out. I'd like to say I felt some kind of relief or closure after confronting her, but honestly, I just felt drained. It was like everything I'd suspected for months was finally confirmed, but instead of feeling justified, I just felt empty. When I got home, I blocked her number and deleted her on social media. I didn't want to leave any door open for her to try and weasel her way back into my life. Looking back, the signs were all there. I just didn't want to see them because I trusted her. But now I know better. If someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. That's where I'm at now, just trying to move forward and put all of this behind me. I know it's going to take some time, but at least I'm not stuck in a relationship with someone who didn't respect me. That's got to count for something. Update 3. For a while, things were quiet. I thought maybe she'd gotten the message and was moving on. But, of course, that was wishful thinking. A week later, she started showing up at my house unannounced. The first time, she knocked on the door and acted all casual, like we were still on good terms. "Hey," she said, trying to smile. "Can we talk?" "No," I said, keeping the door mostly closed. "We've already talked. There's nothing else to say." She looked hurt, but I didn't let it get to me. She started rambling about how she was sorry, how she didn't mean to hurt me, and how she was just confused. I shut it down quickly. "I'm not interested in excuses," I said. "We're done, Sarah. You need to leave." She tried to argue, but I wasn't having it. I told her if she didn't leave, I'd call the cops. She huffed and stormed off, but I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see her. Sure enough, the next time she came by, she wasn't alone. She brought a couple of her friends with her, and they were loud from the moment they got out of the car. They started yelling at me through the door, calling me a jerk for throwing her out, and accusing me of overreacting. I opened the door just enough to make myself clear. "This is between Sarah and me," I said firmly. "You have no business being here. If you don't leave, I'll call the police." One of them tried to argue, saying I was being unreasonable, but I shut the door in their faces. They kept yelling for a few minutes before finally leaving. It didn't stop there. Sarah started using mutual friends to try and get to me. I got messages from people I hadn't spoken to in months, asking if I'd really kicked her out for no reason. She was spinning the story to make herself look like the victim, saying I'd overreacted and dumped her out of nowhere. At first it bothered me. I hated the idea of people believing her lies, but then I realized something. The people who really knew me wouldn't buy into her nonsense. They'd see through her story just like I did. Still, I wanted to make sure I was protected. I started documenting everything. Texts, messages, anything that showed what really happened. I wasn't going to let her twist the truth any further. The final straw came when she tried to use one of my closest friends to guilt me into talking to her. This friend, let's call him Jake, came over one evening and told me Sarah had been messaging him nonstop. She was saying things like, "Can you talk to him for me? He won't listen to me," and even trying to make it sound like she was worried about me. Jake, being the solid guy he is, wasn't having it. "Look, man," he said, "I'm just letting you know what she's been saying." I told her to back off, but you might want to keep an eye out. That's when I decided enough was enough. I reached out to a lawyer to make sure she had no legal claim to anything in the house or the life we'd built together. I wanted every possible tie severed. By the end of that week, I felt like I'd finally regained control of my life. It wasn't easy, but I knew I'd done the right thing. Cutting ties completely was the only way to move forward. Even though the whole situation had been a mess, I started to feel a sense of relief. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, waiting for the next bit of drama. I could finally start focusing on myself and figuring out what came next. Sarah might have thought she could weasel her way back into my life, but I made it clear there was no going back. I was done and I wasn't looking back. Update 4. After everything that went down, I thought I was finally done with the drama. I'd blocked Sarah everywhere, changed the locks, and told her to leave me alone. For a while, it seemed like she was moving on, and I was just focused on getting my life back together. But apparently Karma had other plans for her. It started with a message from a mutual friend. Let's call him Chris. He wasn't one to get involved in other people's messes, so when he reached out, I knew it wasn't going to be good. He told me Sarah was going around telling everyone we knew that I was controlling and basically forced her out of the house. At first, I was annoyed. She was trying to paint herself as the victim, which didn't surprise me, but it still pissed me off. Chris told me not to worry about it, though, because most people weren't buying her story. Apparently, she'd burned a lot of bridges lately, and her version of events wasn't really sticking. Then Chris dropped the real bomb. Turns out the guy Sarah had been sneaking around with, he wasn't the Prince Charming she thought he was. After I kicked her out and she tried to move in with him, he dumped her. The reason? He found out she'd been living rent-free with me while using my money. According to Chris, the guy called her out for being a gold digger and cut her off completely. It didn't stop there. Sarah had been trying to find a new place to live, but none of her close friends wanted to take her in. The one friend she'd been staying with got fed up because Sarah wasn't pulling her weight. She wasn't paying for groceries, wasn't helping around the house, and was constantly complaining about how unfair life was. Eventually, the friend kicked her out too. Now she was couch surfing with whoever would take her in. Chris said she'd even reached out to some old friends she hadn't talked to in years, trying to guilt them into letting her stay. Most of them either ignored her or flat out said no. But wait, it gets better. Sarah was still in school and apparently her grades had tanked. She'd been skipping classes during the time she was sneaking around with the other guy, and now she was in danger of failing some of her courses. She also tried applying for internships in her field, but wasn't getting any callbacks. Word had gotten around about her flakiness and drama, and no one wanted to take a chance on her. I'll admit, when I heard all this, I felt a weird mix of emotions. Part of me felt bad for her. She'd clearly dug herself into a hole. But another part of me couldn't help but think, well, what did you expect? She made her choices, and now she was dealing with the fallout. Then, one day, I got an email from her. Yep, after all the blocking and shutting her out, she found a way to contact me. The email was long, full of apologies and excuses. She said she realized she'd made a huge mistake and took me for granted. She begged me to reconsider and give her another chance, saying she'd do whatever it took to make things right. I didn't even bother responding. There was nothing left to say. I'd given her plenty of chances to be honest and fix things when we were still together, and she threw them all away. I wasn't going to let her back into my life just because things weren't going her way anymore. The funny thing is, I didn't have to do anything for Karma to catch up with her. She created her own mess, and now she was dealing with the consequences. I don't take pleasure in other people's suffering, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like some sort of justice. For me, things have been getting better. I've been focusing on work, spending more time with friends, and even picking up a few hobbies I'd put on the back burner during the relationship. It feels good to be in control of my life again. As for Sarah, I don't know what she's doing now, and honestly, I don't care. She made her bed, and she's lying in it. I just hope she learned something from all this, because I sure did. If there's one thing I've taken away from this whole experience, it's that you can't let people treat you like an option. Respect yourself enough to walk away when someone shows you they don't value you. It's not easy, but in the end, it's worth it. Update 5. A few months after cutting Sarah out of my life completely, things started falling into place for me in ways I didn't expect. It was like a domino effect of good fortune. Meanwhile, word got back to me through mutual friends that Sarah's life was still falling apart, and honestly, I couldn't have planned it better if I tried. First, work picked up. I got offered a promotion that came with a significant pay bump and more flexible hours. The timing was perfect. Without the constant stress of Sarah and her antics, I'd been putting more energy into my job, and it clearly paid off. With the extra money, I started working on some long overdue upgrades to my house. New furniture, updated appliances, even a fresh coat of paint. Everything felt like a fresh start. But the best part? I finally got around to taking a trip I'd been dreaming about for years. A buddy of mine, let's call him Matt, and I planned a 2-week vacation to a place we'd always talked about visiting. It was exactly what I needed to reset and focus on myself. While I was thriving, Sarah's life continued to unravel. Remember how she was couch surfing? Well, it turns out she burned her bridges there too. One of the friends she was staying with posted a rant on social media about how Sarah had been freeloading and refusing to contribute to anything. The post didn't name her directly, but it didn't take a genius to figure out who they were talking about. I tried not to pay too much attention to what she was doing, but people kept bringing it up. Apparently, she was struggling to find a place to live because nobody wanted to deal with her anymore. Her reputation as a user had spread, and even people who'd been close to her started cutting ties. Then came the real kicker. Sarah's school finally caught up with her. She failed a couple of her classes, which meant she had to retake them and pay for them out of pocket. That might not seem like a big deal, but considering she wasn't working and had alienated pretty much everyone who might have helped her, it was a huge blow. Meanwhile, my life kept getting better. After the vacation, I started dating again. Nothing too serious, but it felt good to put myself out there and meet new people. One of the women I went on a few dates with, let's call her Emily, was the complete opposite of Sarah. She was kind, down to earth, and had her life together. Even though we didn't end up in a relationship, it reminded me that there are plenty of amazing people out there who actually know how to treat others with respect. Then I got hit with another surprise. A mutual friend, someone who had been quiet throughout all the drama, reached out to me. Let's call her Lisa. Lisa said she had heard what Sarah had been saying about me and wanted to set the record straight. She told me that Sarah had been trash-talking me to anyone who would listen, but nobody was buying her story anymore. In fact, most people were siding with me because they'd seen how she acted firsthand. But here's the real twist. Lisa also told me that Sarah had tried reaching out to the guy she cheated on me with again. Yep, the same guy who dumped her after our breakup. Apparently, she thought she could convince him to give her another shot, but he wasn't having it. He shut her down immediately and even told mutual friends that she was too much drama to deal with. At this point, I couldn't help but feel a little satisfied. I wasn't going out of my way to make her life difficult, but it was clear that her actions were catching up with her. She had nobody to blame but herself. As for me, I was thriving. I'd reconnected with some old friends I'd lost touch with during my relationship with Sarah, and I'd started picking up hobbies I'd neglected. I even joined a local sports league, which was something I'd wanted to do for years, but never found the time for. The icing on the cake came a few weeks ago. My boss pulled me aside and told me they were considering me for a leadership role in the company. It was still in the early stages, but just hearing that they saw potential in me felt amazing. It was a reminder that I was on the right path and that leaving Sarah behind was one of the best decisions I'd ever made. I wish I could say I didn't think about Sarah at all during this time, but every now and then, her name would pop up in conversations or on social media. The difference now was that it didn't bother me. I wasn't angry or hurt anymore. I just felt relieved that she wasn't my problem. Looking back, it's almost funny how things played out. Sarah thought she could treat me like an option, like I was replaceable. But in the end, she was the one who ended up alone, burning bridges left and right. Meanwhile, I was building a life I could actually be proud of. Karma doesn't always work this quickly, but when it does, it's something to see. And while I wouldn't wish bad luck on anyone, it's hard not to feel like this was the universe's way of balancing things out. I'm not saying my life is perfect now, but it's definitely headed in the right direction. And the best part? I know I got here on my own without anyone dragging me down. If that's not a win, I don't know what is. Thanks again, Reddit, for helping me see things clearly when I needed it most. Here's to moving forward and leaving all the drama behind.